The modern global economy is held together by threads that are thinner than a standard garden hose. If you were to travel deep below the surface of the world's oceans, past the sunlight zone and into the freezing high-pressure depths of the seabed, you would discover the true nervous system of human civilization. It is a sprawling, silent web of over 500 fiber-optic submarine cables. In our daily lives, we have been conditioned to believe that the Internet exists entirely in the ether, a weightless, omnipresent entity that we casually refer to as the cloud. But the cloud does not exist in the sky. The cloud exists at the bottom of the sea. These underwater cables are the absolute lifelines of the modern world, responsible for transmitting more than 95% of all international data traffic. Every single email sent across borders, every video streamed across continents, every corporate cloud service, and an estimated $10 trillion in daily global financial transactions move through these fragile glass tubes at the speed of light. Without them, the international banking system would instantly lock up, global supply chains would freeze, and the digital infrastructure of entire continents would collapse within seconds. For the last half-century, when historians, military strategists, and economists looked at the Middle East, they saw one primary vulnerability: oil. The entire geopolitical anxiety of the 20th century was defined by the visible movement of energy, millions of barrels of crude oil moving slowly across the water's surface in massive steel tankers. The world built entire navies, fought massive wars, and redrew international borders just to secure the physical transit of fossil fuels through maritime corridors. But as we move through the year 2026, the paradigm of global power has fundamentally shifted. The most critical, high-stakes geopolitical battleground in the Persian Gulf is no longer happening above the water. It is resting silently in the mud of the seabed. A new, unprecedented threat has emerged that does not target the fuel that powers our engines, but the data that keeps our entire civilization alive. The nature of modern conflict in the Middle East has quietly evolved from conventional territorial disputes into a hyper-targeted war on critical global infrastructure. Following a sequence of escalating regional engagements earlier this year, a subtle but deeply alarming campaign began to unfold in the information space. In late April of 2026, state-linked media outlets and strategic think tanks inside Iran began to actively distribute highly detailed, high-resolution maps of the Persian Gulf. But these were not standard military charts highlighting naval deployments, troop concentrations, or air defense sectors. Instead, they were incredibly precise schematic diagrams mapping the exact paths, landing stations, and regional transit hubs of the underwater fiber-optic cable networks that line the floor of the Gulf. To seasoned intelligence analysts and global security experts, this public presentation of infrastructure mapping was immediately recognized as strategic target preparation. The signaling became even more explicit when authorities floated a radically disruptive legal and economic concept. They suggested the implementation of a brand new digital transit levy, a maritime data tariff forced upon the megacorporations that own and operate these subsea networks, including global tech giants like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta. The underlying message from Tehran was unmistakable. By asserting a right to regulate, tax, or restrict the data flowing through cables that cross their maritime economic zones, they are attempting to establish themselves as the physical toll-keepers of the global Internet. This is a massive tactical evolution. Rather than relying solely on the historical strategy of threatening oil tankers or mining shipping lanes to gain leverage over the West, hostile actors have realized that holding international data traffic hostage yields far greater asymmetric leverage with significantly less immediate military risk. It is a calculated pivot designed to exploit the total digital dependency of the modern world. In the realm of global strategy, there is an absolute rule that has dictated human conflict for thousands of years: geography is destiny. No matter how advanced our technology becomes, or how fast our digital systems operate, they are still entirely bound to physical locations on a map. To understand the terrifying potency of the threat to our digital infrastructure, you have to look directly at the unique, claustrophobic geography of the Persian Gulf. The Gulf is a semi-enclosed body of water, and its only exit to the open ocean is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow, highly congested body of water separating the Islamic Republic of Iran from the rugged Muzandam Peninsula of Oman. At its absolute narrowest point, the shipping channels within the Strait of Hormuz are just 21 to 25 miles wide. For decades, this tiny maritime corridor has been famous for carrying 1/5 of the world's total petroleum supply. But beneath those very same shipping lanes, the geography forces an even more dangerous convergence. Major international cable systems, including the massive Falcon network, the Gulf Bridge International System, and the Tata TGN Gulf Network, are forced by the physical constraints of the underwater terrain to funnel directly through this incredibly tight, shallow bottleneck. This extreme geographical compression creates a complete lack of true systemic redundancy. These cables are not just alternative routes, they are the primary, irreplaceable digital pipelines for the entire region. The thriving tech-driven economies of the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia are fundamentally dependent on these specific underwater lines to maintain their connection to the global grid. Furthermore, these networks serve as the vital data bridge linking the massive tech hubs of India to the financial markets of Western Europe. Because the physical geography forces billions of data packets into this 25-mile choke point every single second, anyone with the capability to disrupt this small stretch of water possesses a literal kill switch for the international digital economy. If anyone believes that the public targeting of underwater internet cables is mere political posturing or empty rhetoric, they are ignoring a highly specific, dangerous blueprint that has already been executed in the region. The playbook for weaponizing subsea infrastructure was officially proven true during the recent maritime conflicts in the Red Sea. In the early months of 2024, amidst a chaotic campaign of drone and missile attacks on commercial shipping, regional militant groups explicitly telegraphed their intentions to target the critical subsea internet cables running along the African coast. At the time, many Western analysts dismissed the claims, assuming that non-state actors lacked the highly sophisticated deep-sea submarines or specialized diving equipment required to sabotage infrastructure resting hundreds of meters below the surface. That assumption proved to be a critical failure of imagination. Less than 3 weeks after the initial warnings were broadcast, the threat materialized with devastating effectiveness. On February 26, 2024, for major international telecommunications cables running through the southern mouth of the Red Sea were suddenly and violently severed, causing an instantaneous drop of an estimated 70% of all internet traffic passing between Asia and Europe. The method of destruction was terrifyingly simple and required absolutely no advanced military technology. A commercial cargo vessel, which had been abandoned and left adrift after a missile strike, dragged its massive multi-ton steel anchor along the shallow seabed for miles, completely ripping through the dense bundles of armored fiber-optic cables. The incident proved to the entire world that you do not need a multi-billion-dollar fleet of stealth submarines to cripple global communications. You only need a basic understanding of geography, a heavy piece of steel, and the willingness to exploit a vulnerable choke point. The current strategy unfolding in the Persian Gulf in 2026 is an identical mirror image of that Red Sea precedent, but this time it is being backed by the full engineering and intelligence capabilities of a sovereign state. The targeting of underwater fiber-optic cables represents the absolute pinnacle of modern asymmetric warfare because it provides an actor with the ultimate strategic weapon, absolute plausible deniability. In a traditional military conflict, if a nation fires a conventional anti-ship cruise missile or launches a kamikaze drone attack against a land-based data center, the action is immediately visible on global satellite systems and radar networks. The launch point can be traced, the attribution is instant, and the act represents a clear, undeniable declaration of war that triggers a massive, unified military retaliation from Western powers. But a severed cable at the bottom of a murky, heavily trafficked maritime shipping lane is an entirely different story. The undersea environment is a realm of absolute shadow and complexity. If a commercial merchant vessel, a standard regional dhow, or a supposedly civilian fishing boat drags its heavy anchor or drops deep-sea commercial fishing equipment directly over a known cable corridor in the Persian Gulf, proving malicious intent becomes an absolute nightmare for international lawyers and intelligence agencies. Was the severing of the cable a genuine, unfortunate maritime accident caused by an inexperienced captain navigating rough waters? Was it a steering failure that forced a ship to drop anchor in an emergency zone? Or was it a highly coordinated, deliberate act of covert sabotage carried out by a state-sponsored proxy operating under strict instructions to inflict massive economic damage on the West? By the time international investigative teams can deploy underwater remotely operated vehicles to inspect the physical cuts, analyze the ship's transponder data, and attempt to assign blame, weeks or even months will have passed. This legal and tactical gray area allows hostile states to systematically disrupt the global economy and apply immense political pressure without ever cleanly crossing the red line that would trigger an open, conventional war. Once an underwater fiber optic cable is successfully cut or sabotaged, restoring the lost data connection is not a matter of simply rerouting traffic through software. It initiates an agonizingly slow, logistically complex, and highly dangerous physical repair operation that can take over a month to complete. Subsea cables cannot be fixed remotely, and they cannot be patched underwater by divers. The process requires a fleet of highly specialized engineering vessels known as cable ships. These massive, slow-moving ships must physically navigate to the precise GPS coordinates of the break, lower specialized mechanical grapnels to the ocean floor, and painstakingly hook the severed ends of the cable out of the mud. Once both broken ends are successfully brought up to the surface, technicians inside a climate-controlled clean room on board the ship must manually splice the microscopic glass fibers back together, one by one, before re-insulating the cable with heavy protective shielding and lowering it back down to the seabed. The fundamental crisis of this system is extreme scarcity. Worldwide, out of the thousands of commercial vessels at sea, there are only about 63 specialized cable repair ships currently in existence. To make matters worse, at any given time, only 2 to 4 of these ships are stationed in the entire Middle East region. Because these repair vessels are large, completely unarmored, and must remain completely stationary in the water for days at a time to perform the precision splicing work, they are incredibly vulnerable targets. They cannot operate safely in an active conflict zone or a contested maritime sector. If an adversarial power decides to use low-cost drones or fast-attack naval craft to harass these civilian repair ships, the entire repair process grinds to an absolute halt. If multiple primary cables are severed simultaneously in the Strait of Hormuz, entire nations could be facing a catastrophic, prolonged digital blackout that lasts for weeks before a single repair crew can even safely enter the water. The economic fallout from a coordinated, systematic disruption of the subsea cable networks in the Persian Gulf would not be contained to the borders of the Middle East. We are living in a highly globalized era where digital data has completely surpassed physical commodities to become the single most valuable resource on the face of the earth. The modern international financial architecture, just-in-time global supply chains, international aviation tracking, and the rapidly accelerating cloud computing infrastructure that powers modern artificial intelligence all rely on a continuous, uninterrupted flow of data packets across the ocean floor. If the primary digital pipelines passing through the Strait of Hormuz were to be severed or held hostage under an aggressive maritime transit tariff, the economic shockwave would reverberate across international markets within milliseconds. High-frequency trading algorithms would lose connection to foreign exchanges, causing immediate liquidity crises in major financial hubs from London to New York. 4 heavily data-reliant emerging economies like India, which serves as the back-office and tech engine for hundreds of Fortune 500 companies, a sudden severance of these western-bound cables would be an absolute catastrophe. Cloud-based business services, international customer support operations, and global digital trade networks would instantly go dark, resulting in billions of dollars in lost productivity every single day. The sudden loss of bandwidth would force internet service providers to attempt to reroute massive torrents of global traffic through alternative satellite systems or longer terrestrial routes across Asia, completely overwhelming those backup networks and causing severe, widespread latency drops across the globe. It would be a stark, painful reminder to the Western world that their highly advanced digital economies are entirely dependent on physical infrastructure vulnerable to the decisions of hostile actors thousands of miles away. The rapidly escalating vulnerability of maritime chokepoints like the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea is forcing a massive, historic pivot in global strategy. For the past century, global superpowers have focused their naval strategies on keeping shipping lanes open to ensure the free flow of physical goods. But now, international consortiums, tech conglomerates, and sovereign nations are realizing that the maritime domain has become a high-risk, high-cost theater for digital data. The inherent danger of leaving the nervous system of the global internet exposed on the shallow ocean floor has sparked a frantic, multi-billion-dollar race to redraw the data maps of the world. The future of international data transmission is moving away from the vulnerabilities of the sea and heading straight back onto dry land. Major geopolitical alliances are currently funding massive, transcontinental terrestrial fiber optic projects designed to route the internet across vast landmasses, completely bypassing dangerous maritime chokepoints. We are seeing the emergence of overland digital corridors that run from the tech hubs of Europe, through Turkey, down through Iraq, and straight into the borders of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. While terrestrial cables are significantly more expensive to install, require complex diplomatic negotiations across multiple borders, and must be physically protected from land-based sabotage, they offer sovereign nations a vital alternative to maritime extortion. The maps that define global power are being fundamentally redrawn before our eyes. The era where international borders and strategic influence were defined solely by military frontlines and underground oil reserves is drawing to a close. Today, the forces that shape our planet are entirely digital, and the nations that successfully control the physical geography of the internet will dictate the global strategy of the 21st century. The next major conflict in the Gulf will not be fought over the oil that flows above the ground. It will be decided in the dark, silent depths of the sea, over the fragile glass fibers that keep our modern world alive. If you want to understand the hidden forces shaping the modern world, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications. We are decoding global strategy, history, and geopolitics one map at a time, and you cannot afford to miss our next deep dive. Drop a comment below and let us know. Do you think the world can successfully protect its digital nervous system, or is a global blackout inevitable? Like this video to help us beat the algorithm, and we will see you on the next map. This is Atlas Defined, signing off.